Good evening and welcome to Faith Community Church, the pastor's study, and our new byline is Faith Community, House of Love, and we'd like to prove that to you. So come to church, let us show you Christ's love. Tonight I want to speak about Matthew chapter 14, and it's Jesus telling the disciples to get in the boat, cross over, and we know the story. Storm comes and they're terrified. And tonight I would like to ask a couple questions and kind of bat around the big why question that we're asked in our lives, and we ask God and others, why do bad things happen to good people? And so I was thinking about that last night. I thought, well, you could reverse that. Why does good things happen to bad people? Well, it rains on the just and the unjust. I was thinking of a quote from Shakespeare today, and it said, "Let me embrace the sour adversity, for wise men say it is the wisest course." Otherwise, embrace sour adversity because God can teach you something there and is teaching you. So I want to talk briefly about moving from why to what in our life. Another quote about adversity is, adversity doesn't build character, it reveals it. Now, looking at Peter, because Peter's going to understand this is Jesus walking on the water and in the storm, so he had character, but it also, adversity reveals what character you have, and it also wants to build character in your life. And what's interesting in Matthew 14, verses 22 through 33, I like the very first verse before we even get into the story. "And straightway Jesus constrained his disciples to get into a boat and go before him unto the boat on the other side, while he sent the multitude away. And when he had sent the multitude away, he went up to the mountain privately to pray. And when evening was come, he was alone. The disciples are out in the boat. The storm comes. They think they're going to die. And Jesus comes walking on the water. Peter realizes, first of all, they think it's a ghost. They're going to die. And Peter realizes it's Jesus. And he says, "If it's you, Jesus, bid me to come to you." And Jesus says, "Come on out." And he climbs out. And he's walking on the water with Jesus. But then he looks at the waves or looks at the natural situation and starts to sink. And then Jesus says, "O ye of little faith." Well, first of all, would you get out of the boat? And a lot of questions, a lot of truths in that brief little story, example of what happens. But I'd like to ask, why did God allow that? Why did Jesus do that? And where is God now? And all these thoughts have to be going through their head. While it's happening, where's God? After it's happening, well, why did you do that? Why didn't you warn us? That sort of thing. And God knew before the storm what they were going to experience. And this verse says that Jesus told them to go get in the boat and cross the water. Jesus sent them into adverse situations. Jesus sent them into what he knew was going to happen. But while they were obeying him, Jesus was praying. Now, what do you think Jesus was praying about? I believe he was praying about the disciples and their faithfulness and how they trusted him and loved him, and now he's going to send them into a new situation, and he was praying for their response. And so think about that Jesus was praying for them. Think about that in your life. Is Jesus praying for you in adversity or in situations that you're in or that you were in? And why didn't he tell them ahead of time? Because he knew that they needed a trial. They needed to be tested. And so there's all kinds of truths there. Another truth there is the disciples had the herd mentality. All of a sudden, all of them were afraid. All of them were fear of their life. And so I just throw out arbitrarily, what herd do you run with? Do they run by faith? Do they run by fear? Do they run by love? When adversity comes their way, who do you respond to? Who listens to you, and who do you listen to as far as the herd mentality? And just think about the truths that are in this story. And think about Peter here. God was teaching him at least 5 truths there, that he was going to be a leader. He was the leader. That's why he climbed out of the boat. But God also knew that he needed a challenge. God also knew that there's intimidation coming. And as I said earlier, adversity doesn't build character, it reveals it. He was going to reveal to Peter, because Christ already knew how much strength and faith and commitment he had, but he wanted Peter to see that. So many times in our lives there's trials, not because God wants to see if we're faithful. He wants to show us if we're faithful or not. And so yes, there's intimidation. Why? Because he wanted to show God, he wanted to show Peter the need for God in his life. No matter how much he believed, no matter how much the challenge it would be, he wanted to show Peter, you still need me and I'm still here. And so we see some of the situations. Peter was challenged. There was intimidation, the need for God. And Peter was tested, tried, and relied on God. Of course, you know there's a message coming with that. How many times are we tested by God and we're tried by God to show us how to rely on God? So if you're going through an adverse situation in your life, you're wondering about why did something happen or what is happening in your life, but it's easier to look back and see how God walked with you through that trial and the wisdom you've learned from there, and this is a key, people, pass that wisdom on to somebody else. If you've been there and you trusted God and God was faithful, showed you he was faithful, and he showed you the fruit, the evidence of that trial, pass it on to somebody else. Because there's only so many situations in life, and that same situation, if you understand that, God will bring people out of the woodwork. Then all of a sudden they'll just appear, whether it's at the shopping mall or the grocery store or at work or your neighbor. All of a sudden, here's a person that has the same situation that you had experienced, the same adverse trial and same situation that needed God, and you can show them how God was faithful and you were faithful to God. And so Jesus, see, God is always in control. Jesus was in control of that storm. Jesus was in control of the water. Jesus was in control of the boat. Jesus is in control. God was in control. And stop and think of the experience. Think of the experience that those disciples got to tell their children. Think about that. You want to believe in God? Well, you want to know if there's a God? Let me tell you what God did in my life. Let me tell you what God did in these other men's lives. See, and so God's using that not only for them, absolutely helping them. God will absolutely help you to minister to you, to minister through you. People, don't miss that. When God helps you and shows you, and there's the evidence of God in your life, he ministers to you, and you can thank God he was there. Thank God he's there now. And then pass that on to your children. Pass that on to other people. Whatever you learn from God, let God minister to others through you. And so you could tell your children, you could tell other people. It built their faith. They learned how to trust God in an adverse situation, and here's the evidence of God in their life. So, why did God do that? Why did Jesus do that? There's a big question over and over. And people, you need to know this, okay? You can't just quote a verse and say, well, everything's hunky-dory now. You don't know why God's doing something. Oh, it might be evident right now in a small way or a revelatory way. All of a sudden, you realize, oh, we need to switch from why to what. What did you learn with God? What did you learn from God? What are you learning from God? What's the situation? What's the biblical truth that's in your life? And so I often think about, who are we to question God? Who are we to question God? I know of a funeral director years ago that I met, and he's walking us through, and I'm teaching death and dying at MCC, and the whole group of students are walking through, and we're following up, and he leans over and he says, I don't believe in God. And I said, well, why don't you believe in God? He said, well, I had an 8-month-old baby and died, and so there I decided there is no God. And, you know, and of course I was trying to be compassionate. I was trying to show him empathy, and I did. But I'm thinking, who are you to question God? Are you the only one that ever had a baby die? Are you the only one that ever had a child die, a spouse die, a parent die? Are you the only one that's ever had somebody die in your family? Of course not. And it just makes us realize how small we are and how large God is. People, it doesn't matter the adverse situation. It doesn't matter if you're in a storm or you're experiencing a death or had a death. God was there, God is there, and God will be there. So think this way. Don't ask God why. Ask God what. What does He want to show you right now in your life? What does He want to show you having walked with God? What has God taught you? And use that to encourage other people. Everybody needs help. Everybody needs encouragement. Everybody needs to know that God is with them, especially in times of adversity. So don't write it off with a Christianese, quote this or believe that, or ask them, what's God showing you? And let them understand that God is with them and God is with you tonight. So God bless you. May you understand the love of God, and like to see you in church Sunday. Full faith, house of love.